I told you back at the top, the sell signals, 9 counts, and all the sell signals. I told you that the NASDAQ was undergoing distribution. I showed you this back at the top, that we had started to see some distribution here. We got more of it here with the topping tail. Week of the top and the week after the top, we started seeing all this distribution, and I warned you about that. Very similar to these other tops that have developed, other bottoms with accumulation, as you can clearly see on this chart. It shows you when NASDAQ is undergoing accumulation or distribution. Since I called the top on July 11th, the day after the peak, that peak, we've now dropped 11.66%. We'll see if we try to bounce off of this trend line or not, but I warned you before we had the drop that we were undergoing distribution. This was going to happen. If this trend line will hold or not, if we slightly breach it, to rebound, but again, you start breaking this level, you're coming down to the 17,000 area. Great signals. I warned you of all these signals that I've been talking about in the last few days. I've warned you about them all back at the top. So much complacency. I saw that on social media that nobody believed that possible that we could sell off. Now again, we've still got a larger topping process that could develop. We attempt to rebound in this area. You break it, forget it. You get a decisive break of this level with conviction, then you're headed down to 17,000. Support and resistance. We saw the same thing for the S&P 500. Again, I warned you at the top, it was undergoing, as we're getting the rally, into resistance levels that we were undergoing distribution. If we can recover, we may see more of that if we form a divergence. But again, warned you about these signals back up at the top. And what happened? Oh, they were correct again. The hype and the complacency was wrong, telling us there could possibly be no sell-off, yet the signals were correct. About all these bearish signals back at the very top, signals that I warned you about in my last video. I'll link that video at the end of this one. I made that video about the recession. We're now seeing the jobs report predicting a recession. That video on Friday. I'll link that video or my latest Bitcoin video at the end of this video. So make sure you watch some of these important videos, especially the one about recession. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the chart, if you like the information, please consider helping out by supporting the channel today. If you could take a moment to step up to the plate, I would really appreciate that. Put out all the information for free and just ask that you help out as you can, because I don't want sponsors, because I don't want to sell you stuff. But I need your help in order to make it work. So please consider partnering with me by supporting the channel. If you follow the link, it'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. Please consider helping out today. Signals have been absolutely amazing. If you could take the time to step up to the plate today, I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Make sure you watch my last two videos, one on the recession, last video on the NASDAQ and the S&P, looking at the weekly charts, the daily charts, and the intraday charts. Amazing support and resistance levels. The signals have just been nailing it. We'll see if we get a bounce at this trend line on the NASDAQ. Talking about Nvidia later in the video. Bounce off key support levels at 20-week or trend lines. Again, we might see the NASDAQ try to carve out a bottom. I encourage you to watch this video all the way through. Warned you about the 9 counts that were forming in the monthly time frame. The S&P is forming one right now. I think it's going to go back up, and I think you're going to get back-to-back monthly topping bars. Still may sell off before the end of the month, but I think you're going to go back up and likely make a new high. NASDAQ already got the 9 count last month. Warned you about that just before the top was made. Here we had a double sequence count, a couple of double sequence counts setting up on S&P chart of 13 fall by 9. 8 bars the high of the count. I think 9 bars is going to end up being the high of the count if we can rebound. My guess is we're going to. Oh, then we're going to come back to this level right here. Guess is we're going to fill the gaps, and S&P is going to go to a new high, and NASDAQ's going to get a recovery and get a lower high. I heard you about the 9 count on the monthly chart for NASDAQ. Again, I think we'll end up this month attempting to recover back up in all likelihood. A 9-9 reversal pattern. It was not a perfected signal here, but this 9 did give us the pullback. A 9-9 is a reversal pattern. Warned you about all this before and got the top. I warned you with the 8 bar, and I warned you early July, before we peaked on July 10th, that this was forming, but people get so emotional. Don't take heed to the warning signs. Warned you on NASDAQ that we had a 9 count the week before the peak. I warned you about the 13.9 that had set up here in the weekly time frame. S&P got the same thing. We might see a peak there, or because it was a wide range bar, you're probably going to get a topping tail. I told you that before we ever hit this level. Went up and hit that trend line. I showed you the trend lines before we peaked. I told you about the channels that I was watching on NASDAQ weekly chart. We had all these signals, and then the bottom falls out of NASDAQ 3.5 weeks, and people, drop their jaws open in disbelief because of complacency. And you're probably going to make an attempt to go back up. I think you got a good shot of it. There's no guarantee. I think if my signals turn back to bullish and we bounce off the trend line or bounce off the 200, I think you got a good shot of it, of happening. I warned you about all of this. And again, on the 10th, I told you again, we're topping because of these signals. That on the 11th. Told you that on the 12th. On the 12th, I predicted before this bar happened, I told you we're going to get a big, ugly, nasty red bar that looks like this in all likelihood, and that will be the evening star. I told you it will need confirmation and a follow-through. It did just that. We have a confirmed reversal. We'll probably get a counter trend if we can bounce off one of the support levels I'm talking about. In addition to the 9 count in the monthly, in addition to the 9 count in the weekly the week before, I told you we're setting up for a 9 count in the daily, and again, a 9-9 reversal pattern. We had one over here, but it was not perfected, and again, we had another one set up here. They are reversal patterns. I told you the 9 count, mark a top, or we can go a little higher. It marked the very day of the top. I told you prior to that on July 9th that Powell was doing his 2-day testimony, and we could see a post-Powell sell-off with this testimony, and we were getting the CPI. We got that on Thursday. Cool data, but I told you sometimes reports, tops, and I told you that could happen, and what happened, it did. I said all this stuff back up at the top, but I'm just telling you, again, people get so emotional. I'm telling you, my signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish. I'm looking for topping process. I told you what I was looking for. People get impatient, then complacency sets in, and again, we got great signals. You got to have patience as a trader. I told you I was looking for that rally up into those trend lines for the 9 counts, and we got all this stuff. Again, we'll continue to monitor this. We've dropped now 11.66% since I told you I thought we had a top there on the 10th. Got a candle of indecision in the form of a spinning top. Trend line of support. That could possibly be a bottom if we get a big rally back up. Possibly, or we may go a little bit lower towards the 78.6 Fibonacci, which is right here at 17,775, just above our 200 period moving average, just directly below that. So these are some levels of support right now. We're just below our 61.8 fib. We're just above the lower Bollinger Band. We may end up dropping below it. We're hitting the trend line. So again, I'm watching to see, are we going to try to bounce and bottom, go a little bit lower and bounce and bottom? We're going to come down here all the way down to 17, just below 17,000 before we get some type of bottom developing. I'm looking for the clues, but again, we very well try to bounce around the trend lines that I'm talking about in this video. At the highs on Friday, the VIX was up 59%. It was up by 11. It had surged to 29.66, just under 30. We got a topping tail. We began to try to recover off of the lows. Now, one thing you need to know is, again, when I told you S&P was diverging with the NASDAQ, we saw the VIX break out. We saw the VIX get above the 50-period moving average. I told you that, again, there was a contraction with the Bollinger Bands and something was about to happen. It did, and we began to get above the 200 period. Black line right there, and we began to see the sell-off. We got a rebound and then more selling pressure on the S&P and another surge. Now, we're at a major level of support. A decision's going to be made, and I keep saying it. Again, it's possible we have a bottom. Institutions stop selling and they give us a relief rally. We go back to fill the gaps. I don't know that's going to happen. I could tell you what I think. I think it's probably going to happen. I deal in probability. I'm telling you, if they keep selling, we're going down to 49.50, the neckline of the head and shoulders on the S&P. We're going down to 17,000, just below 17,000 on the NASDAQ. If they keep selling, don't. S&P will rebound, likely make a new high, and NASDAQ will go make a lower high and fill the gaps. Those are the two scenarios. It's not up to me. That's not up to you. That's up to the institutions who control everything. Now, if they allow it to happen, we could have a topping tail. Oftentimes, this will top before the S&P bottom, so we still might go a little bit lower and try to bottom out around these levels. If we don't, decisive break, then look out below. Know the future? You don't know the future. I'm just looking at support and resistance. If we have a topping tail, we might attempt to carve out a bottom, as I've been talking about. Triple diversions on the stochastic and another reference point of a divergence here on the RSI. So we'll see what happens with this topping tail right here. Do we start going back down to try to fill a gap? We may attempt a recovery on the S&P and then sell off further, or sell off further and then attempt a recovery. It could happen either way, but just something worth paying attention to. This is predicting that we'll have an update on Monday. It may start off lower, but the VIX is predicting. Now, VIX is predicting a 95% chance that in the next two sessions, Monday or Tuesday, we'll have an update. The close on Thursday, it's predicting an 85% chance that we have an update on Monday. Now, again, no indicator is perfect. I'm just telling you. And again, if we start going parabolic, as we're trying to do here, you throw all that out the window. If you start getting a pandemic sell-off or something like that, then the VIX just starts soaring. That's when the calculations, that's when you have the probability of it not playing out. So right now, there's an 85% chance from this level that on Monday we'll have an update. From Friday's close, there is 95% chance that either Monday or Tuesday we'll get a bounce or a bottom. So there you have it. We'll see what happens. And again, if we continue to go parabolic, VIX, you throw it all out the window. That's when it doesn't work. See if we get an update Monday or Tuesday. One of the signals may fail, like the Thursday signal may fail, but this signal still may play out. Maybe we have a down day on Monday and still get an update on Tuesday. If we have an update on Monday, then both of these signals will be correct. We had the big surge in the weekly time frame. We broke this downtrend. May pull back towards it if we try to get some kind of recovery in the market. The MACD's turned into positive territory. If it rolls over like it did over here and like it did over here, then we can get a recovery. And you could see a big downturn in the VIX, okay, and maybe back testing this level or moving back, establish a higher low. We hit this trend line and the NASDAQ topped and the S&P right after that. So again, you got a bullish falling wedge here that again is now play. We still may back test if we get an attempted recovery. If we do, the MACD goes negative. When the MACD goes into positive territory on the weekly chart of the VIX, then again, bad things happen. If you stay in positive territory, you'll end up seeing a much bigger sell-off like what we had happen over here in 2022 until we got the October bottom. So again, it stayed in positive territory. If it rolls over, you buy a little bit more time. So again, we'll be watching. If it stays in positive territory, market's at risk of a bigger dump. Again, we saw stochastic get above 50 with this move over the last 3.5 weeks. Again, if it rolls right back over, you buy a little bit more time. If it remains positive, we can get a bigger sell-off. Again, the extreme lows marked major tops in the market during the selling pressure. Again, if it rolls back over, it buys us more time, and we can back test a breakout of the bullish falling wedge. If I just extend the trend line out here on the MACD, you can see the diversions. We moved to a new low there on the VIX, but the MACD made a series of higher lows. It's given us the breakout of a large bullish falling wedge. Is the VIX going to go parabolic now, or is it going to top out and pull back and give us a relief rally to go back and fill the gaps? $64,000 question. As I mentioned in my previous update, again, we've taken out the trend line. We're at the 100 period. You're at this level of support directly below that, underneath the 100 period in the cloud there. The question is, are we going to try to form a bottom here or get a bigger drop to the 200 and horizontal support at 49.50? And again, do we just continue on with the head and shoulders formations, try to go back and fill the gaps? And again, the decision, not mine to be made. Institutions keep selling. We are going to go lower. stop selling and let the buy the dip crowd and the retail investors come in and buy it back up, can sell some more at top dollar, will form some type of bottom. Talked about Bitcoin had already taken out the trend line but got back above it. Do we see the same thing with the S&P 500? Possibly. It's head and shoulders, whether we get the drop now or whether we get the drop later and then go to a new high possibly, is still got a good shot of forming. To remain bearish, but we're coming into a support level that we need to be paying attention to. And as we are coming into this support, NASDAQ is hitting that trend line again from the January 2023 low. If we end up breaking this level, then the 200 period is below that, down over here, and this gap fill down over here, just under 18,000 at the 17,890 area. So we've got our gap fill up here, 20,400 rounding up. So again, just some important levels to be paying attention to. Right now we're at this horizontal support level with that trend line at 18,189. So again, I'm watching. Do we continue to go down to the 17,000 area? This is actually 16,973, but just 17,000 rounding up there. Do we continue onward? Do we bounce and then continue onward? Or do we attempt a recovery to go back and fill these gaps? I'm watching Nvidia. I'm watching the semiconductors very closely. And Nvidia getting a little bit of bad news about its a delay of its latest chip, which I'm talking about in this video. It may go down to that 97 area. But we, in the 100 on the S&P, we're hitting, we're just above this horizontal support level from the peak over here at the April 1st high there. Again, an important level I'm watching right now. Risk is, we get a bounce and keep going, or we just keep going. Institution stops selling, we can get a relief rally. Look at these signals, though. The signals remain bearish. I warned you back up at the top that we had sell signals that were forming, and then we got the gap lower, and momentum shifted, trend signal shifted, and again, the shaded area warned we were about to have something happen, and it did. We got a drop. At the 100 period moving average. Got a couple of signals here saying a bounce was going to happen. It did. Got a buy signal, but it remains unconfirmed. It was a false signal. And again, we're coming up to the trend resistance levels right here, stalling at these levels and the upper end of the cloud and so forth. So again, shot at a rebound here or just a little bit lower at the horizontal support. But risk is that we keep going all the way down to here and all the way down to here. That's the risk, that we just keep going and you get your large head and shoulders. Again, let me say about the gaps. You don't have to fill the gaps. Do I think we're going to fill them? Probably. Know the future? I don't know the future. I'm just looking at support and resistance. We're coming into some support, a little bit lower levels, and maybe we try to bounce off these levels. There's no guarantee we do. These levels break, then you go to the next level of support, just like up here. We broke down here, we broke these levels of support, so we come down to the next level of support. You break these levels of support, you come down to the next levels of support. It's all about support and resistance. So again, we break this trend line right here, then you're coming down, probably down to this trend line, overthrow the 100 period a little bit, but last time we hit it, we bounced off of it. We were just above it, right where we're at right now on S&P. NASDAQ overthrew it. Well, now it's overthrowing it just a little bit. So again, I'll be watching. We could still form with like momentum right here. You could still see a divergence develop and go a little bit lower and then try to bottom out, or rebound and go a little bit lower and try to bottom out. But I'll be watching. Momentum is negative. It's got to go back up into the positive region to turn this around. Again, I'll be watching to see if any bullish signals show up. But right now, again, I warned you back up here, the momentum line had turned bearish. It's still bearish. Even with this buy signal, it's unconfirmed. Trend signals remain bearish. Momentum and the trend are still bearish. See if we try to attempt to bounce here just under the 100 and at horizontal support, or if we break those levels. Our signals remain bearish. Tried to warn you back up at the top. Warning signs that were taking place when we had these signals form. Warning this was about to happen. So what I want to see is some bullish bottoming signals, maybe like the blue B right here, or the buy signal, I want to see rally back up. Maybe those signals start showing up or go a little bit lower and rally back up. But I want to see those signals, and then I want to see it confirmed with the momentum line turning back to blue and turning back up, like what we had over here with this bottoming process over here. Topping process over here, we turned down, confirming these signals. Or over here, we had this sell signals, and they were confirmed. I want to see that. Then eventually, momentum turning back up in a positive territory if we get a confirmed reversal. S&P daily here. Same thing with the NASDAQ. Again, we had a bullish buy signal. Bar remained red. The S&P, the bar turned to green. But again, couldn't flip the trend signals. Again, we halted cap resistance and back tested the trend line as I talked about. And S&P had halted at the 20 period moving average. NASDAQ here at horizontal resistance, and we turned back down. You got a candle of indecision now. You got some bullish signals here, but again, they're unconfirmed at this point. Momentum line is still bearish and pointing down. Trend signals are still bearish, and again, we're still in negative territory with the momentum line. Momentum line still bearish, and momentum here still negative. Again, we'll be looking at this candlestick closely. We're at a trend line of support. Do we start seeing a reversal? This is predicting an update for Monday, so we'll see what happens. A signal fails again. You have a Tuesday signal, Friday's close, 95% chance we get an update either Monday or Tuesday based on Friday's close on the VIX. If the signal plays out or not, but again, here, again, the cloud is still bearish. Below this line right here that represents the swing move, and it's turning and starting to roll over here. There's risk if we start taking out the trend line and of getting a bigger drop if we can't find players at these levels of support that we're coming into. Institutions keep selling, we can go lower. And the risk is we go back to the 17,000 or just under the 17,000 area, coming down here, completing the right side of a head formation. That is the risk. That is very possible if the levels of support break. My signals remain bearish. Remember over here, I kept saying my signals remain bullish. Then the opportunity came. We got these signals slamming right into the resistance levels. Now, again, in order for NASDAQ to turn back to bullish, you got to get the moment. You got to see some bullish signals begin to show up here. Okay, we've started to see a few, but you got to see the signals confirm with momentum turning back to bullish, like what we had over here. Okay, little arrow, the momentum line turning back to bullish diversions with momentum, things like that. Don't have that. Signals remain bearish. Now we're overthrowing the 100 period. Okay, and again, we're at a major trend line of support. When we were over here, we overthrew the 100 period, and you found a bottom. So again, we might try to find a bottom in here near this level, near the trend line of support. I'll be watching to see if signals begin to turn back to bullish. We might get a big rally like we had here and see signals start turning back to bullish with a big rally, maybe ahead of a big rally. So I'll be watching for clues, but right now the signals remain bearish. Now one thing right up here, lines representing the swing move, and it's going flatlined, okay? And again, that means that we still may go up and fill those gaps. Now if it starts turning down, then you can get a bigger drop, okay? But if it remains flatlined, we might start moving, bottom out and start moving back towards it. Could be suggesting, if it remains flatlined, that we might attempt to rebound to fill the gaps and find a bottom in this area, maybe surrounding the trend line of support or just underneath it from the January 2023 low, which I've talked about on NASDAQ. Again, momentum and trend signals are bearish. Here we got the reversal of conditions. We lost the 10-period moving average. We peaked on the 16th, diverging with NASDAQ. I talked about that at the time. We gapped lower. We got the red bar here. I talked about that at the time. The 18th, we saw momentum officially shift after losing the 10-period moving average the day before and gapping lower. It was a gap and go. We talked about that at the time. I want to watch a gap. Is it a gap and go, a gap and fill, or a gap and trap? It was a gap and go. Came down, we lost the 20 period. We tried to rally up into the 10 and got rejection. Came down to the 50, tried to bounce, rallied up into the 20 and got rejection and dropped back below the 50 period. The risk is we keep dropping to the 200 and to this level here, which again would be the formation of the head formation, completing it. That's the risk, that we just break support and just keep going, and that could happen. Again, you could say, well, I think this might happen. I'm telling you, if we break the support levels we're at right now, we start going a whole lot lower, inch down a little bit and bounce, but I'm talking a decisive break, especially on the NASDAQ. Risk is you go down to the 17,000 area and 49.50 here on the S&P and 17,000 on NASDAQ. Got a couple of green bars with that fake rally we got. I think we got a shot at a bottoming process here, but you break, you're at risk of coming all the way down to 49.50 in the 200 period moving average. I hope you hear what I'm saying. Signals remain bearish. Could we bounce here? Yes. Could we rebound and fill the gaps and move to a new high? Yes. Could just as easily break these levels and go down to the next levels of support. So I hope you hear what I'm saying. You'd be able to see these signals remain negative if that were to happen. Shot at a bottom. No guarantee the institution stops selling yet. You just complete the right side of the head formation right here, right now. We're going to bounce? Probably. Risk is my signals remain bearish. So just be clear about that. I don't know the future. I'm just looking at support and resistance and my indicators. I warned you after we had peaked, we started to see red bars begin to appear on the S&P, and I told you again, sometimes with the first, second, third bar, you attempt some kind of recovery. The weekly time frame, times you just start selling. Here we got the red bars over here, and we attempted a recovery with a lower high, and then we sold off further. So sometimes it plays out that way. Here we got the red bars. We continued the selling to form the diversions, which again, these weekly divergences are now playing out. Bouncing off the 20. Here we are at the 20, so we'll see what happens. At the 20, the risk is you go down to the 50 and to this 49.50 area and towards the 200. The 50 and the 200 period in the daily, the 50 in the weekly. You got the bearish signal. You see the little red arrow? You see the red bar? And we took out the cloud. Again, you got a bearish reversal of conditions. You're below the 10-week moving average. The bulls had better step up to the plate here and bounce off the 20 or just a little bit lower if they're going to attempt to fill those gaps. Otherwise, the risk is you're coming down much further. S&P weekly. Now, same thing for the NASDAQ weekly. NASDAQ weekly here again. You got the red bar last week. Now you get the red arrow. We tried to flip it last week, bouncing off the 20, prevented that sell signal from happening. Still closed below the 10, the red line, the 10-week moving average, but this week we closed below the 20. They're similar to what we had over here, but you got your red bars. Again, told you sometimes you get the red bars after recovery, other times you don't. Again, the risk is we continue to the 50-week moving average down here at 17,000 and go lower before we go higher, and the risk is we don't go fill the gaps, that we get a right shoulder near this area here, which is right where we're at right about now, and not fill those gaps. I think you got a good shot at filling the gaps if the trend line can hold, if we can get a recovery. That's the risk. Signals remain bullish. If we're going to get a rebound back up, we got to see those signals turn back, or my signals remain bearish. Got to see the signals turn back to bullish if we're going to attempt a recovery. We've dropped for 3.5 weeks straight. If we get a relief rally or not. If we do, then I'll be watching. If we go back and fill the gaps in a counter trend, watching the upper boundary of the cloud here and the red dots of resistance. We'll be watching these levels should we attempt to bounce in the weekly time frame. NASDAQ weekly chart, S&P or NASDAQ daily chart. Again, we tried to get some green bars, went back to red. So again, might be that we have to go down to the 200 or 17,000 and break these support levels. You got a shot at it. As I keep saying, no guarantee. The signals, as you can clearly see, remain bearish. We have a red cloud, the red bars, 10s cross to 50, the 20s about to here on the NASDAQ. So again, there's risk of going to lower levels. Bounce off the trend line I talked about in my last video. NASDAQ off the January 2023 low. You got a shot at a recovery to try to fill these gaps, but there's no guarantee we do it. If the signals remain bearish, then there's risk of going a whole lot lower. Be watching as the bulls and bears fight it out. Will the bulls try to regain their footing? Will the bears push us down further? Signals for momentum and the trend remain bearish. See if that changes. A shot at a bottom, as I said, but there's no guarantee. Hope you hear what I'm saying. There's no guarantee. Trend line of support on NASDAQ that I've been talking about. You got a shot. We get a decisive break of that level. Look out below. What could take Nvidia down to 97 to the trend line of support if we break the 20 is it's being reported here over the weekend that they're delaying its next AI chip due to a design flaw. Watching Nvidia pre-market trading going into Monday, and then with the trading session on Monday, how that impacts the NASDAQ 100 and other chip stocks. And we'll be watching the semiconductors. To pay attention to with NASDAQ at its trend line from 2023, January of 2023, as I talked about in my last update. Nvidia has this trend line here from October of 2022, and there's a very good chance we either bottom here at the 20-week moving average, or you come down to 97. And we hit, what was it, 101 or 102, whatever was the low. Let me check. That was 101.37. That was a low. Closed down by 5%, over 5% for the week. We closed down at 107. If we go down to test that low, again, you still have horizontal support here at 97.39. You still have the rising trend intersecting with that level. I'll be watching to see if we do go lower. If Nvidia does go lower, that's where I think support would give us a bounce. It could be we don't reach that level and we bounce off the 20-week moving average. NASDAQ has moved just beyond the 20-week. S&P is at the 20-week. And you got a shot at a bounce. Now, maybe bounce here off the 20-week, but just some levels I'm watching. If we try to bottom out one of these levels, the 20-week or these support levels, the trend lines, could try to rally into its earnings late August. I think it's August 28th. Rally next couple weeks to go back and fill the gaps. Nvidia has peaked, and I think the NASDAQ has peaked, and the semiconductors as well. Another case for the NASDAQ is we got at that 20-week moving average. We hit the 100 period here in the daily time frame, just above that trend line, again, just above this horizontal support at 97.39. But you got a hollow red candlestick on Nvidia. Now, hollow red candlesticks often mark short-term bottoms or major bottoms. Often, not always, but a lot of the time, they do, just as black candlesticks can be associated with short-term peaks or major tops. This is a hollow red candlestick. Again, it may be that we try to bottom here, again, as I've said, and eventually come back and fill the gap here at 126. You got another gap here just below that, right around the looks like a 120, 22 area or so, give or take. I think these gaps will eventually get filled going into the Nvidia earnings if we can bounce here at the 100 and the 20-week that we just looked at on the weekly, or go a little bit lower. Eventually, I think we're headed down here. I think we can rebound back up, fill these gaps. Look at the powerful rally we had at 13% or something like that, 11, 13%, whatever, earlier in the week. Everybody on social media, oh, it's over, it's over, it's over. And then, boom, the bottom fell out, and we moved to a new low. I was expecting NASDAQ to get another lower low, but I think it's bottoming out, shot at a bottom at these support levels, either here at the 100 period on Nvidia and the 20-week, or down at these trend lines directly below it. It's not that much lower, the trend line and this horizontal support level, if we do end up dipping just a little bit lower. 101.97 is not that far. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bottom develop down with Nvidia, with the semiconductor ETF, and the NASDAQ surrounding the support levels that I've been talking about. But again, eventually I think you come down here. I think you get a bounce when the Fed pivots on the 18th, 200. You got a shot at this massive head and shoulders with Nvidia, very similar to what I'm looking for on the NASDAQ. Told you back at the top when the NASDAQ was peaking, the semiconductors was getting a bearish engulfing, just like we got over here, back-to-back bearish engulfing that formed a divergence. If the semiconductors if they're going lower, so's the NASDAQ. Nvidia got a lower high, semiconductors got a higher high, and so did NASDAQ. Huge red flag. Nvidia did not make a new high. Divergence played out on the MACD down here and up here on the RSI. Talked about that back up at the top. Semiconductors peaked on the 11th. The NASDAQ peaked on the 10th. And again, now they're doing the same thing. We're getting this big drop. I think it's like 25% now. I measured it. If we go lower, again, you got your 200. Same thing with NASDAQ. You got your 200 just directly below. You got a candle of indecision, a spinning top. Is it a continuation and we bottom out down here? or is it a reversal pattern that we try to bounce on NASDAQ around that major trend line? With the semiconductors, you got the 10 and 20 now dropping below the 50. But again, you got these gaps back here. So again, I think you got a shot. Now, I don't know if we reach this 198 in the neckline of the head and shoulders here immediately, or if we try to go back up, come back down, and get this big recovery. But you've got these gaps. So you got a gap way up here. You got the gap from Friday there. You got the gap up here, way up here near the top. And again, Nvidia, NASDAQ, they all have the same thing. Do we go back and make a recovery to try to fill those gaps or not? Or do we go a little bit lower and then attempt to do it near the 200 period or horizontal support with the semiconductors? But if the semiconductors and Nvidia can attempt to rebound, well, then you might see it with the stock market. And like the NASDAQ, we're becoming very oversold. Very oversold. Now, maybe that just gives us a bounce and then we go lower, and get a larger diversion, so we got to go lower. But possibility NASDAQ tries to form a bottom at the trend line of support. Taking the time to show these to you because, again, the semiconductor, ETF, and Nvidia, this is what the NASDAQ's following. And it's doing the same thing. They bottom and try to recover and go back and fill these gaps, and NASDAQ may too. If they keep going lower, well, then look out below on the NASDAQ. As quickly as the semiconductors approach the 200 period, we've now lost 24.5% from the top. I told you the semiconductors were peaking, and that was going to cause NASDAQ to go sharply lower with that divergence that I talked about back at the top. Below that, we have, again, a potential neckline for a head and shoulders just below the 200. It might be that that's where we need to end up going before we bottom out, but currently we're down nearly 25%, 24.5%. So again, at some point, we're going to get some kind of rally back up. Likelihood. Will these gaps fill? Don't have to fill, but very well could. We could try to bottom here or a little bit lower at these levels I'm talking about. But again, semiconductors have lost. This is the semiconductor ETF SMH. It's lost nearly 25% of its value.